Right now, though, in less than 24 hours, the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea will deliver judgment on the maritime boundary dispute between Ghana and Ivory Coast. Now, Ghana headed to the tribunal after it had failed to resolve the matter through diplomatic discussions. And Ghana is currently undertaking exploration works in the disputed area. But the International Tribunal in Hamburg, Germany, will settle the dispute when they sit tomorrow. Already, legal teams from Ghana and Ivory Coast have arrived in Hamburg ahead of tomorrow's ruling, and we have all of the analysis and build-up to tomorrow's decision. But Joseph Akable is a JoyNews journalist, and he has been on top of that story that looks at the background, the arguments and demands of the two parties in the dispute in this report.
We do that by respecting contracts. We do that by putting in place good frameworks for the exploitation of the resource, and on the state side, how the state manages the revenues and resources to the benefit of the people generally. We also would do that by seeking to add value to the find, promote the establishment of petrochemical industries onshore to generate employment, to produce, say, fertilizers, to support agriculture, also to improve the conditions of life of the towns and villages immediately abutting the place of exploitation. Of course, the general economy too.
The man under whose tenure Ghana discovered oil in commercial quantities. Former President Kufuor's view was shared by many following the discovery. Little was known then that part of the area the deposits had been discovered will become a subject of dispute. Ghana says its western neighbor, La Côte d'Ivoire, has for years agreed that the area of dispute belongs to Ghana. The French-speaking country, however, changed its views shortly after the announcement of oil discovery by Ghana. This led Ghana to seek to settle the matter at the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea. Hearing of the matter started on September 3, 2014, after parties had agreed to the composition of the 5-member special chamber. La Côte d'Ivoire then put in a request for provisional measures. They wanted the chamber to ask Ghana to suspend operations in the area in dispute. Adama Kamara spoke on the country's behalf.
And it will render ineffective your decision to intervene on the merits, which will affect the exercise of judiciary function. Côte d'Ivoire, therefore, requests your chamber to put an immediate end to these activities.
Agents for Ghana Maritime appear upon disagreed and urged the chamber to reject the request.
The impact of the provisional measures sought would be extraordinarily serious for Ghana. If the order were granted and all work had to stop, it would have a devastating impact on our oil production and exploration throughout a large area of maritime territory previously recognized by Côte d'Ivoire as belonging to Ghana. It would be a massive impact on finance, employment, and development. The impact would be irreparable and beyond quantification.
The court turned down the request by the Ivorians but proceeded to direct no further drilling be undertaken. Bulalem Bugeteya is the president of the chamber.
Considering that, in the view of the special chamber, the suspension of ongoing activities conducted by Ghana, in respect of which drilling has already taken place, would entail the risk of considerable financial loss to Ghana and its concessionaires, and could also pose a serious risk or a serious danger to the marine environment, resulting in particular from the deterioration of equipment.
This sets the stage for the substantive debate.
In our case, Mr. President, distinguished members of the tribunal, there are a number of circumstances which call, in this particular case, for the application of the angle bisector method, as I will demonstrate first of all.
Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire have mutually recognized, agreed, and applied an equidistance-based maritime boundary in the territory sea, EEZ, and continental shelf within 200 miles.
The two concepts that happen to be the main bone of contention. Both countries agree measurement of the maritime boundary should start from boundary post 55. Ghana insists that if the equidistant method is used from this baseline, the disputed area will belong to Ghana. This method simply requires that once a median line is identified between the countries, a second determination will be made whether the line needs to be adjusted. Ghana's agent Gloria Kufu insists this ought to be the method to be used and not the method Ivory Coast is proposing.
The evidence before the special chamber clearly shows that the principle of equidistance ought to be affirmed as the equitable solution because the parties themselves have adopted an equidistance-based line. But even if they had never considered this matter and the question of delimitation arose for the first time during this case, we submit that equidistance is the principle which ought to be adopted.
Ivorian Representative Maitre Petron disagrees. He told the special chamber the angular bisector method should rather be used.
Taking into account these elements, Côte d'Ivoire has tried to find the best of methods, which in this particular case will lead to an equitable solution. The equitable solution is the primordial objective, the fundamental norm, as you can see in the Tunisia-Libya judgment.
The other leg of Ghana's case is that both countries have for years agreed that the area in dispute belongs to Ghana.
There is no valid reason to depart from a maritime boundary which the parties have both long considered as lawful and equitable in its effects.
Co-agent for the French-speaking country, Adama Tugara, rejected this assertion.
Ghana has given you a version of history which is not in line with reality. Even if Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana have concluded an agreement on their land boundary, Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana have never concluded an agreement on their common maritime boundary.
The tribunal has so far prepared its ruling after hearing the arguments of the two. The demands by both countries are at sharp variance. Both countries want a declaration with each unwilling to make a concession. Ghana is asking the chamber to state that Ivory Coast has for years agreed that the area in dispute belongs to Ghana. Agent Gloria Kufu told the chamber in a wrap-up that Ivory Coast was barred from making such a demand due to this admission for decades.
Ghana respectfully requests the special chamber to adjudge and declare that 1. Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire have mutually recognized, agreed, and applied an equidistance-based maritime boundary in the territory sea, EEZ, and continental shelf within 200 miles, in accordance with international law, by reason of its representations and upon which Ghana has placed reliance. Côte d'Ivoire is stopped from objecting to the agreed maritime boundary.
The Ivorian delegation sees this request as strange. They consider exploitation the area as an affront to the rights of the French-speaking country.
To declare and adjudge that the activities undertaken unilaterally by Ghana in the Ivorian maritime area constitute a violation of, firstly, the exclusive sovereign rights of Côte d'Ivoire over its continental shelf as delimited by this chamber.
Adama Tugara also wants the chamber to ask the two nations to meet and decide what is due Côte d'Ivoire.
And consequently, A, to invite the parties to carry out negotiations in order to reach agreement on the arrangements for reparations due to Côte d'Ivoire, and B, to state that if they fail to reach an agreement within a period of 6 months, as of the date of the judgment to be delivered by the special chamber, said chamber will determine the amount of this compensation or the arrangements for reparations on the basis of additional written documents dealing with this subject alone.
The Ghana delegation won't have any of this. AG Gloria Kufu requested an outright rejection.
There is no valid reason to depart from a maritime boundary which the parties have both long considered as lawful and equitable in its effects.
On Saturday, all eyes will be on a 5-member chamber presided over by Boalem Bugetea.
Thank you. The session is closed.
So, the case will be closed. For JoyNews, Joseph Akable reporting.
So that is Joseph Akable with that background there for you to understand. I'm going to let you hear what President Akufo-Addo has been saying about this particular day, which is tomorrow, that was supposed to be history for us. But just so you know, this is a map that shows you, this is actually the part of the West African map, and this is Ghana, and that's Cote d'Ivoire. So you see, you have an idea of where we're drilling at the moment. We're drilling at the Cape 3 point at the moment. That's where we're drilling. But if you look at the area, we're looking at all the way from Accra, you have Lomé. I'm talking about all of those who are borders on the Gulf of Guinea. We have Lomé here, and when you come all the way down, there's Malabo here, there's Equatorial Guinea, there's Libreville as well, and there's Sao Tome thereabout. Now, the area of dispute is right about here. This is where the area of dispute is. And like I said, we're at the moment drilling here at the Cape 3 point. So let's look into the radius and all of those discussions. Very soon I'll have I'm going to have a geographer take us through the very minute details. But my colleague, who has been following this story quite closely, is here in the studio. He's going to take us into a bit of the details of the area in dispute. And Joseph, well, let's go. What do you have there? You were telling me about all of the radius and the whatever deals. Let's see. How does it work? This is the map there, from the map of Ghana there. Right up above where Joseph is the Cote d'Ivoire border, right? The border between Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire. So Joseph, explain to us what we're looking at.
So what we need to understand is that there are two concepts that the two countries are advancing. So whilst Ghana is talking about an equidistance method, Cote d'Ivoire is looking at an angular method. In simple terms, when you rely on the equidistance method, you get this line. You realize that from the tip of Ghana, you have a dotted line. Now that dotted line is where we have boundary post 55, where both countries seem to agree that that is where the border starts from. So right from the dotted line through to the end. So that is if you are using the equidistance method.
Okay.
So if you look at the line carefully, you realize that the black spots you see, those are the oil wells where we are drilling the oil. You realize that using that line, all those wells are on the right-hand side,
okay,
which means that they belong to Ghana.
Right.
Now, the Ivorian concepts they are putting across, the angular method, if you rely on that, a good number of these wells rather move into the left-hand side, which means that it goes into
okay, so
Ivorian
if we're
territory.
using the Ivorian system, where would the dotted line have been?
The dotted line will run this way instead. So you have a number of the wells. So for instance, Trenebois 1, Owo 1, the Owo 1 ST, the Enyenra 2A, those ones will be inside the Ivorian territory, okay, and not Ghanaian territory. So we are looking at, in terms of the quantity of oil that is generated daily, you are looking at around 80,000 barrels per day. That is not very different from the about 100,000 that we are getting daily from the Jubilee field. So that tells you how much worth this is to the country. So while Ghana is arguing that, I mean, this is an area that they claim that Cote d'Ivoire for years agree that it belongs to Ghana. I don't understand why all of a sudden Ghana has decided, Cote d'Ivoire decided to change its view and now argue that we need to change
and that's because Cote d'Ivoire or Ivory Coast in the past has accepted Ghana's model of, calculating, which part of the sea or which part of that area belongs to the country. It's something that they disagree with. Their position is that as far as they are concerned, they can only talk about a dotted line, because that is where, if you watch closely, you realize that it's a change in color. That is where the land boundary is. They say that if it is clear that Ghana has a land boundary with Cote d'Ivoire, they don't think it's the case that for that offshore we have agreed extensively with them. So they are arguing that that is not the case. They say that as far back as 1988, that was when they made the very first attempt to try and engage Ghana to be clear in its mind the extent of the boundary. Most countries don't care much about offshore boundary. The reason being that if you have the sea and there's nothing in the sea for you, why do you care so much about it? But when there's resource available, that is when countries become interested. So they say 1988 they tried to engage Ghana. Ghana was not showing much interest in the matter. Then it moved on all the way to 1992. They say Ghana approached them. They were waiting to conclude their discussions with Ghana. Ghana went a step further and started drilling in the area, for which reason they were surprised. They say that they lost their president, Hufebweni, in 1992, and since then they had a long period of political instability. So that affected their ability to engage Ghana on the said matter. The next time they realized they were gaining some stability and ready to engage Ghana, in 2007 they heard the big news that we had found oil in Cape 3 points and the surrounding area, and this area has to do with the very area that they had been saying since 1988
they have been trying to engage Ghana to understand and let the two nations agree on where their boundary ends and where that of Cote d'Ivoire starts.
Right. Hold on for me briefly, Joseph Akabli, but let's hear what the president had to say. Just so you know, either ways, the result of tomorrow is going to have implications for both countries and for our economies as well. So it'll be very interesting to know what it holds for us, what tomorrow holds for us as Ghanaians and of course as Ivorians as well. But let's hear from President Akufo-Addo on his thought ahead of tomorrow.
First aspect of all these things is to be atomistic, to think that if you look at your own national narrow sectional interests, you can lose the bigger picture. And it is that bigger picture that we want to have before us all the time so that we can make the decisions that will benefit our farmers and benefit our economy.
President, when do you think you'll have a decision on this by, on cocoa?
I don't know. We're talking.
Okay.
We're talking.
Talk to me about the dispute with the Ivory Coast on the ocean and the oil fields.
The decision is on Saturday. We're waiting to see what decision will be made, and we'll see how best we can enforce the ruling of the court.
Let's say you lose, how can you lower the impact? Because this would have huge economic consequences for Ghana.
Yes, it would. It would. But I mean, a lot of work is going on in that way. I would prefer to wait and see what happens on Saturday before I tell the world how we're going to respond.
That is President Akufo-Addo there. We'll hear also from Tullow Oil PLC. They are a major oil partner for us here in Ghana. So Joseph was explaining to us, now I'll bring you Tullow in a bit. But if you look at our map here, and Joseph, I'll come to you so that you pick your thoughts on this one as well. What's going to happen is that if either ways, whichever way this case goes, there's a possibility that people in Lomé could also start agitating or could also, start arguing about which space here belongs to them. There's a possibility that people in Malabo will also start making some complaints. There's a possibility that people in Libreville, people in South will also start making some, raising a few concerns about what belongs to them or not. And that is certainly a very interesting development if it should happen. Joseph?
Yes, it is something that we can't expect. And that is why individuals such as Sam Okujeto have argued that it is important that Ghana settles its boundaries, not just offshore. He's talking about even in terms of land boundaries. Mostly we only have areas where you move across to the other country, like you go to Aflao, you go to Elubo, those ones are very clear. But in the hinterland, mostly don't have the boundary extending there. Now we are fortunate that in terms of our boundary with Togo, we don't have any oil deposits around that side. So that is why perhaps we haven't found some yet. The reason being that some years ago we had that issue coming up in terms of people talking about it. If many years ago we didn't have anyone at Cape 3 Points, but we were able to discover that in commercial quantities in 2007. So what it means is that perhaps we are not having any at that side, but with this particular one coming up, it may be time for us to deal with it once and for all. We should be clear, our neighbors should be clear the extent of our boundaries, and more importantly, we should put it into writing if need be and get them to agree to it so that in the event there's any dispute in future, we can fall on that agreement and say that this is what you agree to, you can't disagree.
So a lot depends on what happens tomorrow. What happens tomorrow is going to determine a lot of cases. I mean, should any such dispute come along, or should we find any oil deposits in the Gulf of Guinea, as I have shown you, going forward. But the operators of the Jubilee and 10 partnership, Tullow Oil, has expressed how sensitive the disputed area is to the company's operation. In an interview with Joy Business, Group CEO of Tullow, Paul McDade, noted that the disputed maritime area is indeed key to their operations. Hear him.
But we're confident that we will be going back to drilling next year. I've been this week in Ghana and here in Accra meeting with the new government, and they reassure me that there'll be an appropriate resolution to the boundary dispute through loss, and we'll be able to move forward.
How critical is this to the group in terms of getting past this thing and going ahead with your strategy and everything? Because I know that you do your own extrapolations and projections, and all these investors are also doing the same thing. Yeah. How critical is the completion or the finalization of this in terms of the group's plan, strategy, and implementing all the things that you have planned to turn around the business?
Well, I think what's, is it critical? Well, I think it's very important. I I think what's important is that we've been a great champion for investment here in Ghana. Ghana is a great investment destination, and we want to portray it globally. We're a global player. We're out with global investors who watch our investments, and a big part of that investment is here in West Africa, and particularly in Ghana. So I think what's important to us is to be able to demonstrate that the investment that was made in 10, we can get on and maximise the revenues from that investment, both on behalf of the state of Ghana in terms of the fiscal payments we make, and also the returns that we want to return to our shareholders. So I wouldn't say it's critical to our business going forward, but it's very important, and it's important cash flow. All cash flow is important, but I think the important thing is that with a smooth resolution of the boundary dispute, it demonstrates to inward investors that Ghana and West Africa is a good place to invest, it's a good destination to invest, and that's something that ever since we got involved in Ghana in 2006, over 10 years ago, we've been out in the global markets pushing the case for investment in Ghana and pointing to our good relationship with the various governments that we've worked with and our ability to invest our investors' money in Ghana.
All right, so very soon we'll be taking you through what the two countries are demanding of each other. And Joseph Akable is here. We'll also tell you who is on each panel and what they bring to the table as much as possible. We try and do that. But Kwame Jantua is Vice Chairman of the Public Interest and Accountability Committee. They are, the watchdogs when it comes to the oil and gas industry. He joins me on the line. Sir, thank you very much for your time here on The Pulse.
Good afternoon, and good afternoon to your listeners. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to hear what the gentleman from Tale was saying.
Okay, not to worry much. Well, let me find out from you what your thoughts are. I mean, how are you feeling ahead of tomorrow?
Your call has been put on hold.
Okay, you can always suspect such things, it's technology, right? We'll raise him back. I think he must have clicked something on his phone. That's why we lost him, but we'll raise him back on the line. But like I said, we'll be going through a few things. Let's start with what we have here. The special chamber and its membership. You have all of the names here. Boalem Bogatia, there's a president, and okay, all the others. Joseph Akable will go through all the names for us, tell us what he knows about them as well. So Joseph, let's start with the special chamber membership.
So what is of interest is the fact that, 3 of the individuals were selected by the ITLOS itself, but the other 2 members, and if you look at what we have on our screens, the ad hoc judges, those judges were selected by the 2 countries. The 2 countries had the opportunity to pick those individuals. So we are talking about Ronnie Abrams. He was picked by the Côte d'Ivoire, whilst that of Ghana had to do with Thomas Mensah. He's a Ghanaian. He's a lawyer. He has been working with ITLOS for some time as a judge. So Ghana nominated him to join the panel as an ad hoc judge.
Okay, at the moment, I think what we have is the legal team for Ghana. So let's deal with Ghana.
Okay, the legal team. So we started first with Marata Briapia-Opon, who was then the Attorney General and Minister for Justice. She was later replaced by Gloria Kufu, who is the current Attorney General. In fact, she argued Ghana's case because at the point where she took over as Attorney General, the case had got to an advanced stage. We can also look at the representatives for Ivory Coast, Adama Tungara. He is the Minister for Petroleum and Energy. We also have Dr. Ibrahim Diaby, the Director General of Hydrocarbons and Ministry of Petroleum and Energy. He's serving as co-agent. Those are the legal team. But what we need to understand is that it's a larger team. In terms of the Ghana team,
but these are the people that are
key individuals. The Ghana team, I counted as many as 50 individuals, all part of the team. So Ghana's case.
All right, so hold on for me, Joseph. We're going to be looking at the cases right after I speak with Mr. Jantua. Sir, thank you very much for your time once again. We lost you briefly. You're going to tell me about how you feeling ahead of tomorrow.
Well, it's 3 things. It's either it is it's the verdicts for Côte d'Ivoire, either verdict for Ghana, or they might have a verdict where they indicate that we should negotiate and share the disputed area. Now, if they decide that we have to share the disputed area, it will be based on revenue share, and it will be based on how much is invested by both sides within that disputed area. We hope that, it will go our way, because there are huge implications for the economy if it goes either of those two ways. If it goes their way, then that one we have to now come back to base and see how best we can start accelerating our oil production within the other basins we have in our offshore basin. And that would mean we're looking at Salpon Basin, we're looking at Accra Basin, and we're looking at Keta Basin. The other thing that could also happen, based on the verdict that they gave, it could also give the Togolese to the impetus to take on a dispute with us on that equidistant line. You see, they both have agreed to equidistant line in the past 5 decades, and that is one of our claims, that we don't understand why at this moment, when they have agreed to these equidistant lines all this while, they are coming up with this. That was one of the bases why we took it. So it is crucial that we have an outright win. That is very crucial. It can affect investment if we are to share. It would put the oil companies within that disputed area in a very difficult situation. And so for us, the best verdict would be to us. Now, I've looked at the case that Ghana has put forward. It looks a strong case. Right. However, judgment is in the bosom of the judge. So let's see how it goes.
Let's see how it goes. Well, it's quite interesting, I must say. You've spoken about the effects. That was exactly what the Tallow representative was talking about, the kind of effect that this will have for them. But yeah, as a partner, Tallow is a partner to us when it comes to our oil drilling. With the arrangements, with the current arrangement, the outstanding agreements that we have with Tallow, how then will it affect us as a country? Will they have to be reviewed? Will they have to be totally withdrawn? How does it work? Do you know?
If it so happens that we share, then it will have to be reviewed. We'd have to look at it. A new insertion has been brought in. For me, one of the major ones that could be very worrying, very, very worrying, that can also affect royalties, is the Hess block. The Hess block is in ultra-deep waters. The Hess block has 5 associated blocks within it and 3 unassociated blocks. When I say associated, it has blocks with oil and gas and has blocks with only gas. It's only a handful of companies that can do ultra-deep. Hess is one of them. If it now goes to Côte d'Ivoire's, if it goes Côte d'Ivoire's way, they have all that. It's challenging for us. And can you imagine, if it goes our way, the kind of revenues and royalties that would come into our economy? So it is key, and yes, those contracts that have already been signed with Tallow and Cosmos and all those in the unified group in the Jubilee field, definitely, we would have to look at it, because it would alter the revenue. Right. It would alter royalties. It would alter surface rentals. It would alter quite a lot of things. Wow. So yes, we would have to now go back and see how best we can do it. But we hope and pray that our case that we've put forward is strong enough for them to judge it our way. It has a lot of economic implications, even for work. Now, onshore, I heard a few comments on the onshore bit that we should try and secure. And let's go back to the plebiscite of 1956. The plebiscite of 1956 brought the Northern Territories, the Volta area, the Western and Ashanti and the Southern area together to form Ghana as one. I am finding it very difficult to see how any other border country, if we discover oil and gas onshore, can say that they are part and parcel of it. Because the plebiscite has drawn those borders completely. Right. Maybe what we are saying is that we should now do what Donald Trump wants to do for Mexico.
Build a wall.
Have a definite wall. And if it's not a wall, it could be a chicken fence wall. Maybe it is high time we started looking at that, because you see, you can enter Ghana from either way. The other thing that we should be very careful of, and we should start looking at in terms of onshore, is that we don't have a situation like the Delta, where because our borders are porous, others would now try and claim that oil fields that will be very close to the border is part and parcel of their land.
Right. Before I let you go, sir, briefly tell us how much money we have pumped so far into oil exploration.
Now, so far, I can tell you how much money we have made as Ghana.
Okay.
And we are only looking at the Ghana listing. We are not looking at Talu or Cosmos.
Okay.
Because that one, the only interest for us there is our surface rental, our royalties, our taxes, and one or two other things. But so far, for the Jubilee field alone, between 2011 and 2016, we've made $3.4 billion.
Right.
This amount of money has come into the economy. Now, when you compare it to other natural resources, amounts coming in, this supersedes all of them. That is why it is very important that we take interest in these oil fields.
Right. Okay. Well, sir, thank you very much for your time and for your insight into this matter. Kwame Gentwa is Vice Chair of the Public Interest and Accountability Committee. You've heard it. The stakes are really high, especially for us here in Ghana, because we have already started exploring this. Joseph is still here. Let's wrap up this conversation. Joseph, take us through the rest of the information. I think we didn't go through the membership of the special chamber. If we could quickly do that, then we know. Do we know anything about these judges?
So we can speak specifically about the two individuals who were nominated as ad hoc judges. But just quickly through Ghana's case so that we rush over to that side. So the bit about the fact that the parties have for years agreed that that should be the boundary. They also say that all these years Côte d'Ivoire never had any reason to complain. So that bullet point can also be seen. Then they say that abruptly and unexpectedly they changed their position. So we can move on and look at the other aspects of the case.
Well, let's move on to Côte d'Ivoire's case. What's Côte d'Ivoire arguing for?
So they say they commenced discussions over the boundary with Ghana in 1988, but it didn't yield much as Ghana failed to respond to its proposal. They say all of a sudden Ghana in 1992 requested resumption of negotiations, which was inconclusive. Ghana went ahead to undertake drilling operations in the area, and following death of President Félix Houphouët-Boigny, CIV, that is Côte d'Ivoire, generally slipped into a lengthy period of serious political and social instability. They said that as they were beginning to escape the crisis, Ghana announced discovery of deposits close to the disputed area. So that is the thrust of the Ivorian case there. So we can still look at some other issues in terms of the membership of the panel, and also talk about the demands that is being made by the two countries and what they've put forward before the special chamber.
So let's look quickly at the judges. The judges will be sitting on this matter. Any information about them?
So it has to do with Boulalem Bougueteya. He is the president for the panel. We also have Rudy Gawo he is one of the judges, Jean Hupak, another judge. You also have Thomas A. Mensah, he's a Ghanaian, an ad hoc judge. Like I stated earlier, he has worked with ITLOS for some time now, and he was nominated by Ghana. They allowed the two countries to nominate an individual each. So the Ghana individual is Thomas Mensah, and that of Côte d'Ivoire is Ronnie Abraham. So he will be serving on it.
So let's look at the demands and wrap up.
The demands. So Ghana is saying that the Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire have mutually recognized, agreed and applied an equidistance-based maritime boundary in the sea. And by reason of CIV's representation over the years, they are stopped from objecting to the agreed maritime boundary. So that is a legal principle that simply says that if by action or in a subtle manner, you act in a manner that agrees with something, you cannot go ahead and change the position because you've agreed to that for years. And CIV's claim of violation of special chamber order is rejected. So that's what Ghana is asking at the chamber to do. So we can go ahead and look at that of Côte d'Ivoire.
Right.
So for that of Côte d'Ivoire, it says that Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire have mutually recognized, agreed, and applied an equidistance-based maritime boundary in the sea. So it still has to do with the Ghanaian one. But essentially what the Ivorians are asking for is the fact that Ghana has violated their rights. They've not stuck to what they are saying. They are saying that they've not had any agreement with Ghana in terms of the specifics. They say that we've been engaging you. If we've agreed, we cannot come back and say that let's have discussions over that boundary. So they are rejecting that entirely, and they're asking for reparation, which in simple terms, compensation of a sort. What is due Cote d'Ivoire should be given to them. If they don't get it within 6 months after judgment, they are asking that the chamber orders both parties to come and let the chamber decide what you should give to Cote d'Ivoire.
Okay, well, we'll see how it goes tomorrow. It's less than 24 hours, isn't it? But Joseph Akable, thank you very much for that very thorough work and very thorough explanation there. You've heard it all. What's at stake, you know by now. But let's hear from lawyer Samuel Kujeto. He's an international lawyer and once chaired the Ghana-Togo Demarcation Commission. He has some very interesting experiences from which we can draw some knowledge from. And he's been speaking to my colleague Mamavi Owusu Abuaje. I know you've heard it, or probably seen it since morning, but just so you refresh your mind about what he had to say about this.
There are certain situations we can easily avoid. And you avoid it by doing what is necessary, which in this case was not concluded. And that's part of the problem, in the sense that Ghana was having Ghana-Cote d'Ivoire Border Demarcation Commission, just as much as they have the Ghana-Togo Border Demarcation Commission, and then the Ghana-Burkina Faso Border Demarcation Commission. Those things are necessary for the simple reason that every country should know what its territorial boundaries are. Some countries are lucky. They have, let's say, the sea as a boundary. And there, because there are international treaties which govern the law of the sea, it's easy for them to know that, okay, you have your territorial boundary limit, so and so nautical miles from shore. That one is simple and easy. The rest becomes everybody's free highway, if you like to put it that way. In our case, it was not so, because the boundaries were settled by the colonialist governments who had previously what you might call scrambled for Africa when they cut bits and pieces, cutting across tribes and linguistic groups. So sometimes you find out that in the case of Cote d'Ivoire, you have enzimas in Cote d'Ivoire, you have enzimas in Ghana. Sometimes even the same families, one here, one there. Sometimes one is a minister in Cote d'Ivoire, another one is a minister in Ghana. You find the same thing in the Ghana-Togo border demarcation, that there are, I know of instance where the bedroom, the person's head is in Togo and his feet is in Ghana, because we had not laid down rules for building on the boundaries. In some instances, it is the hill that divides the two countries. In some instances, there are rivers or rivulets or streams, which are the international boundary. But you also know that even rivers do change boundaries, because as the seepage occurs, sometimes the river changes its direction. And therefore, when you don't agree as to where the boundary is, it can create confusion. And in the case of Cote d'Ivoire, this is exactly what happened. In fact, it happened in the Togo one. We have not got any dispute yet, but because we did not complete the demarcation process, have it signed, approved by the parliament of the various countries. This was the reason why this problem about Cote d'Ivoire arose.
How is it that we've been able to live peacefully with no disputes, and just when we found oil, this issue cropped up?
Disputes always arise when there is an economic interest involved. It's always the one that triggers, because otherwise it's immaterial. If you have a tribe which is living across there and they come here and they farm here, in fact, there was during my own work as a border commissioner, you find out that there were situations where we were arresting Togolese, allegedly for smuggling cocoa. And then it turns out, in fact, they were even jailed by the court. But then, when I went to the border, I found out that The people were actually 3 kilometers inside Togo. And yet we went and arrested them because the border guard didn't know where the border was. That's an economic interest. Because if not because of cocoa, which we thought was an economic crop and a benefit to Ghana, there would have been no need for those kind of arrests. So this is what happened in Togo because there was oil. And so now the question is, who owns the oil? Who has the right to provide a concession to those who want to explore the oil? This is the basis for the confusion.
What's your own answer to that?
My own answer was simply because when I was chairman of the Border Commission, eventually the PNDC went and locked me up in Oshaford. Then I heard on the radio that they have appointed a new chairman for the Border Demarcation Commission, where we had not concluded our work. In fact, a lot of the decisions we took had not been implemented. And I was in the prison, I was laughing. I said, these are idiots. Because the person they are appointing to do the work, you have no clue as to what to do. Because there should be a change, there should be proper change. That means I should be able to sit with the new chairman and tell him what work we have done so far, what is left to be done, and how to go about it. But that was not done. And so, in this case also, you find the same thing. That James Mensah was originally the chairman of the Côte d'Ivoire Border Commission when I was for the Ghana one. He died, somebody else took over. But they did not complete the work that should have been done. So successive governments come, they lack the, what you might call it, the decisive nature to take a decision and say, this is important. That don't